This is Gagan Girotra, IIT Roorkee class of 2000, and I am Calcutta class of 2005. So in this video, we are going to discuss an argument that I picked from the Hindu, the newspaper, on 10th of February. Now, the argument states that the transitory effects of demonetization on inflation and the output gap are not clear yet. Therefore, the Central Bank of India, which is the RBI, has opted to sit pat on rates and choose to give itself some time. Alright, so you may want to take a minute, pause this video, go through the argument and the three statements given below, and then continue with the discussion. Alright, so let's begin our discussion now. Now, the first part of the argument that I typically like to identify is the conclusion. You would recall from the critical reasoning basics video that without a conclusion there is really no critical reasoning argument. So if we are able to identify the conclusion first, we'll find that the rest of the pieces will be far more easy to identify. So in this given argument, clearly the conclusion, this word gives it away, therefore. So therefore, the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee has opted to sit pat on rates and choose to give itself some time. Opted to sit pat. Now, just for your clarity, for your understanding, sit pat means to sit tight and not do anything. Okay, so that's the conclusion. All right, the next thing we'll identify is the premise. Now, as far as the premise is concerned, premise is typically the background information on which we have figured the conclusion out, or in which the speaker has figured the conclusion out. So the premise is the first sentence of the argument: the transitory effects of demonetization on inflation and the output gap are not clear yet, right? So this is the premise. And finally, the assumption, which is always, if the premise were true, then the conclusion should be true, right? So in this case, the assumption becomes a central bank should change interest rates, right? A central bank or the central bank's committee should change the interest rates only once it has ascertained these two things mentioned in the premise, right? So the two things mentioned in the premise are effects of demonetization on inflation and the effects of demonetization on the output gap, right? So that's our assumption. A central bank should change interest rates only once it has ascertained the change in inflation rate and changes to the demand gap. All right. So now let's explore the three statements that were given below the given argument. Let's see how they are related to the given argument. Now the statement one says, in Argentina, right? So it talks about another historical case. In Argentina, interest rates were increased by the central bank, obviously of Argentina, right after demonetization, and this resulted in severely increased inflation. Okay, so what we see here is that the increase in the interest rates by the central bank happened right after demonetization. So you would notice that this situation is exactly similar to the situation in India, right? The central bank is having to decide whether to do anything with the interest rates, and the point of time is right after demonetization, right? So right after demonetization, Argentinian central bank, they did increase the interest rates, and what happened? It resulted in increased inflation. So I've broken down this statement here, right? So Argentina increased interest rates right after the demonetization and without ascertaining the A and the B, right? And what did it result in? It result in hyperinflation, which is obviously a negative outcome, right? So if the outcome is indeed negative, right, then this statement clearly supports our assumption. The assumption is, do not touch interest rates right after demonetization. Why? Because it may have an adverse effect, right? So very clearly the statement one comes out in full support of our assumption, right? And therefore it supports the argument, right? Let's move to the statement two. Okay, so the statement two states that it talks about a situation in Germany. In Germany, interest rates were decreased by the central bank right after their demonetization. Okay, now so there was some change in the interest rates right after demonetization, and what happened? It decreased inflation, right? So now a reduction in inflation is actually a positive impact, right? So what happened was that sorry, this should be Germany. What happened was that in Germany, the central bank did change the interest rates, right? And it did lead to a positive impact, right? So what is this statement doing? The assumption says do not touch the interest rates, right? We don't know what will happen. But this statement says, oh, you do touch the interest rates and things will move positively, right? So clearly this statement is in disagreement with our assumption. So we can say that the statement 2 is actually weakening our assumption and therefore weakening the entire argument itself. Let's look at the third statement. All right. So the third statement talks about, oh, this should again be Singapore. My apologies. Okay, so the Singaporean central bank opted for a partial demonetization in place of a full one, and it was able to control inflation. Right now, you would notice that the assumption or the argument really talks about central bank changing interest rates. Okay, only after it has ascertained A and B. Right, but in this case, there is not even a single mention. It does mention demonetization, right? Although it mentions partial demonetization, but it does mention demonetization. So a student could get confused that there is a discussion on demonetization, but really the assumption is on changing interest rates only after you've ascertained A and B, right? Now if you do not talk about these, then this statement has nothing to do with our basic argument. All right, so this statement has no relation. So when you would have this statement as one of the options in your question, you would have to ignore this option. This is neither strengthening nor weakening your argument. Thanks for watching the video. You can give your feedback in the comments section below. Please click the like button if you thought the video was helpful. For lesson updates, you may subscribe to my YouTube channel People Plus, or you may read my blogs at peopleprep.com, or you can directly connect to us through our Facebook page @PeoplePlus, or you can email to me at gagan@peopleplus.com. Thank you.